Okay, so we're going to represent on page 15, that is, have a graphing calculator ready. We're going to represent data graphically. I would call this organizing data. You're going to organize it to a certain degree. Okay. One of them I already showed you how to do, which is a line plot. Okay. But there are essentially, in this unit, 4 ways that we use to graphically represent data. And before you start any of these graphs, I would strongly encourage you to find the MCTs, standard deviation, and range. Okay, so basically I'm going to tell you this. Find the mean, find the standard deviation, and find n, as well as the range. Like, these are, in my opinion, must-haves. Okay, must-haves. Because they all help you make your graphs, okay? Line plots we've already covered. So basically a line plot just looks like this. And then you put your points down on there, right? That's what it looks like. I'm not going to do that one again today. Possibly as we do ACs and whatnot, we will review that. But then we'll do frequency tables or chart. Like, we'll organize data. And a frequency table or chart usually looks like this. It will have 3 columns. When you make it yourself, it will have 3 columns. Okay. It will have the interval, INT. I'll make a big version of it later, okay? Interval, this is what we call the tally, and frequency. I really apologize, it's small, but for now, just make a table, okay? Just so you know, frequency table, that's what it looks like. Histogram is similar to bar graphs. So when you do a histogram, you will have bars that actually connect, okay? And it could look like that. Okay? A frequency polygons is where you connect the dots with straight lines. You know what I will do to help you out? I like, when you do your frequency polygon, I actually start with a histogram. Okay, I start with a histogram, and then I find the midpoints of those bars, which will be right halfway between the width of that, and then I connect the dots with straight lines. So, right, you do one of these. So I superimpose them. I blend the histogram, and over top of it, I make my frequency polygon. It makes it easier, in my opinion, because creating those bars, you're going to get it straight from the interval. You're going to figure out how wide does my bar have to be, and they all will be the same width, by the way. And then I just connect the midpoints of their peaks, and that is the frequency polygon. So this is the frequency polygon. And this obviously is the histogram. So I will actually say this, maybe you can think of it, there's really 3 ways to represent this graphically, like a line plot, frequency table. You need a frequency table to create these 2, right? This is a requirement for steps 3 and 4, so I will also highlight that part. So I'll repeat. Line plot can be done individually. You don't need a table, nothing like that. Frequency table, you will make it. And you will basically organize data. Write that next to it. You organize data. Okay, that's what you do when you make a frequency table. but you can see some patterns already when you make this, okay? And then using this, you either make your histogram or you make your frequency polygon. It's up to you. And we'll add that to our study sheet. Don't worry about it. We'll get there, okay? Here's a reminder of how to do line plots. I will put a page number in here so you can look it up if you're studying. Let me just look up the line plots. Like on page 5, for example, we did one. So I'll just say see page 5, for example. Okay. But I want to focus on the other ones today. And I'll give you the long, messy version of the frequency table steps. Okay, these are steps. So you create a table with 3 columns, right? So you've got 3 columns. They're called interval, tally, and frequency. I will strongly recommend every time to use a sorted L1 to enter your data. Determine the number of intervals you want. Determine the number of intervals that you want. I'm going to be honest with you here. I will tell you how many intervals to use. This is why. It's a nightmare to mark if one of you chooses 5, the other one chooses 7. Like, if you choose 5 intervals, your graph will have 5 bars. If someone else chooses 7 intervals, you'll have 7 bars on your graph. And it's just crazy. Like, it's just, for marking purposes, I'm not going to let you choose. I'm telling you already, okay? But you can choose anywhere between 5 and 12. Note the number of intervals can be chosen by you. On an assessment, you will be given the number of intervals used. So I maybe highlight that so you don't worry about it when you go over it. Calculate the interval width. Okay, you calculate the interval width. You can round this number. How do we do that, guys? How do we do the interval width? Like how wide our bars are going to be? We usually take our range and we divide it by the number of intervals that we would like to use. So I'll tell you this. For marks, when it comes to marks in this class for a test, the most common interval width is 10. 10. So I'm going to have my graph. I'm going to go from 0 to 10. How many students go in there? Hopefully nobody, right? 10 to 20. How many students, right? 20 to 30. I'll go up by tens. That's just a common way to do marks, right? You split it up into tens. But not always. Sometimes we're going to have to go hundreds. Sometimes we're going to have to go thousands, okay? Start your interval column. Use the interval width. Use a low enough value to include the lowest value of the set. Okay? If a value falls between, so highlight this one. If a value falls between 2 intervals, place it in the lowest interval row. Okay, so I will use a different color so it stands out. Yeah, okay. I think ignore this for now. For a minute, okay? Imagine that you've used this table, you've made this table, you've got your interval, tally, and frequency. What is tally? Is you're counting. This is counting. So basically, as you go through your list, right, let's say this is representing the amount of snowfall in any given year. And you have what's your interval width, by the way? How much are you going up by every year, every interval? 25, do you see that? You're going from 100 to 125, 125 to 150. You go through all your years that you're keeping track of, And you figure out that there are 3 years where it snowed between 100 and 125 centimeters. So this is your counting. This will be growing as you go through your list of numbers, okay? Once you've done that, you actually write down, well, there's three years that snowed between 100 and 125. How about this one? By the way, it's hard to see, but when we tally, we go 4, and then to do a fifth value, we go across like that. So that's like a bundle of 5. Add another 3, so that means that there's 8 years involved in this situation. There's another 3 years where it snowed between 150 and 175. And then the last one, watch this, make sure you make those lines across. We always bundle in 5, so it's easy to count. So 5, 10, and another 2 is 12. So just so you know, guys, the tally column will be ignored at the end. Like, we won't worry about it, but it's kind of like your running count. Your running count as you go through your numbers. So now, 3, 8, that's 11. Another 3 is 14. Another 12 is 26. 26 values or years that are being considered. That is your, what we call the end value. Okay? So that is always what you want to check at the end of the day. Did you get all of your values in this frequency table? Okay, so once you've done this, and we're going to practice how to do this shortly, but once you've created this, now we can create the 2 graphs from this. Okay, can you write down here interval width? I usually just go interval, but it is actually the interval width. And you can write down that it is 25. Right? You go from 100 to 125, 125 to 150, and so forth. You determine that width, and then you go with it. Okay? Then we go to 16. It says use the frequency table to create a histogram or a frequency polygon. Highlight this part, okay? The interval is always placed on the x-axis, while the frequency is always placed on the y-axis. If you're not starting at 0, use a zipper. You only use that in stats. You don't use that in any other. So a zipper is like this, right? Like you're skipping a bunch of values. So if you ever want to start, let's say you start at 500 and you're skipping a bunch of values, you just introduce what I call a zipper. There's probably an official name for it, but I'll just use zipper. So if you let's say you want to go to 500 and then you want to go up by 100 from there. Wait a minute, you went from 0 to 500, now you're going up by 100? Yes, to make up for that, we just introduce the zipper and then you're fine. Okay? We'll do both at the same time here. Histogram and frequency polygon. Let's go to this graph. I'm going to provide you with a grid. It makes it prettier, makes the graphs prettier. So what goes on the x-axis? In this case, it's the interval. Right? Interval, what is our interval in? It's in centimeters. I don't like just writing down intervals, so I'm going to say snowfall. We're just going to make this up, that the interval represents the amount of snowfall in centimeters. And then the y is the frequency. And we'll say it's the number of years that this happened. In this case. 100, 125, 150. Okay, that's going to work. So if I look at this, like how do I start? Guys, watch carefully on this one. All you do is you go to your table, your frequency table. This is what we're going to start with. And then we're going to go up by 25 every time. Okay, so you start with 100. I made this work, so this is going to represent my 100. And then the next line here is going to be 125. I'm going to leave a consistent gap, okay? This is 150. This is 175. And this is 200. It works perfectly in this case. But you notice the flaw, right? We're going up by 25 every time. So this gap is 25 throughout, but all of a sudden you have 100 here. That's a problem. So introduce this. That's going to make up for that skip, okay? Okay, what about frequency? Frequency, you look at the values you have in your frequency table, right? So the highest number that you have to account for is 12. So that's kind of like your scale. So let's see, if I go 5 and make this 10, this is 11, this is 12, you will be able to fit in everything just fine, okay? I'm going to use a blue pen. I'm going to use a blue pen for my graphs. I would love it if you use a ruler normally. Today, I don't really care. But what's my frequency from 100 to 125? How many years are we talking about? It says 3 years. So I'm going to go up to 3 and cut the bar there and close it off on either end. And I like to put the number of the frequency on top of that bar. The next one is 8, right? You go on your table, 125 centimeters to 150 is 8. So 8 would be right here for me. So just cap it. And yes, the bars are supposed to touch. Okay. So I've got 8. The next year is back to 3, okay?
Custodian to room 49, please. A custodian, please enter room 49.
And then it's 12. If you want to do the 2 and 1 every time, all you have to tell me, give me a legend on the side. Right? So the bar is the histogram. And now I'm going to do the frequency polygon over top. If you don't like that idea, it's okay. Then you just gotta, basically what you're going to have to find is the midpoint between 100 and 125, which is right down the middle of that bar. So you make a big dot right in the middle of that bar. Okay? And then you find the midpoint of the next interval, and you go right in the middle at the height of 8, and you make a dot there. And just continue this process until you're until you get the midpoint of every single bar. And the rule is you have to close it on either end. So you can't just go from 3 to 8 and so forth. You actually have to close it. So just make sure you go to the x-axis and connect the dots from there. Okay. As long as you close it, you're fine. So this is my frequency polygon. If you think about it, it is sort of a polygon. It's not a regular polygon, but if you consider the x-axis, right, and you take that shape, it is a polygon. It's a concave polygon nonetheless, but that doesn't matter. That's a different scenario you don't have to be too worried about. So if you like to do two at the same time, it doesn't take that much more work. I would do them both at the same time. So just make sure you have a legend if you want to do both. Okay? All right, so this is how you graph once you have your table. Okay? Now, this is going to take you back to what we've already covered. What if I asked you to determine the mean, right? The mean and the standard deviation of this set. Okay? You will say, look at the frequency table. Okay? And then determine midpoints. Morning. Determine the midpoints. Now we could look at that big table on page 15, but I'm going to ask you to just make a quick table like this, where we have our frequency, we have our interval, and we have how many rows? 4 rows. So 1, 2, 3, add another one. So we had 100 to 125, 125 to 150, 150 to 175, 175 to 200. And we had 3, 8, 3, 12. Page 16. Morning. What happened to the tally column? Where did it go? I don't need it anymore, right? The tally is just as you're working. It's kind of like your rough draft, like, you know, when you're asking for a piece of scrap, and you're like, I want to make sure I keep track of what I'm doing. But once you're done the question, you can toss it, right? So same thing here. So what you need to do every time is determine the midpoints. So you need to create this extra column here. How do you find the midpoints again? Min plus max, right? You add up these two, divide it by 2. So I'll just give you the numbers today. This would be 112.5. This would be 137.5, 162.5, and 187.5. Maybe just for, I'll just say this is 100 plus 125 divided by 2, right? This is 125 plus 150 divided by 2, and so forth, right? That's how you got these numbers. What you do every single time. Basically finding the average between, right? So when you have a frequency table, you don't have the individual numbers. You don't have them all, right? So you put this into L1, this into L2, and then you go one variable stats. Don't forget about L1, comma, L2. And then you find your mean, your standard deviation, and I would like to come up with n. N could be, and this, it's 26, it should be 26 trees, no, years, right? We talked about years that were considered. This could be students, trees, you name it. The mean is 160.58 centimeters. The standard deviation is 27.67. Hey, centimeters. Did you know that 10 plus 10 is the same thing as 11 plus 11? You didn't know that? Because 10 plus 10 is 20. And 11 plus 11 is 22. What a crazy teacher. Eh? Okay, I'm going to stop this one here. So this is kind of like how to